welcome back to Paddock and Track, the show where we bring you news on and off the track. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Max.
Hi guys.
And today we are going to bring you the Austrian Grand Prix and other news in the F1 world. So let's get right to it.
Yes, so the Austrian Grand Prix was another sprint weekend.
Yes.
I feel like there's a lot of sprints this season.
Definitely.
But it's all right. Gives us some more racing actions, better than
Yes.
just a practice session. So for the sprint qualifying, not anything too out of the ordinary.
No.
Except for Leclerc, he had no time set in Q3.
Yep.
So of course, then by default he is down in P10. Same thing for Sargent, no time set, but in Q2.
Yep.
Yeah, so he's down in P15. Otherwise, though, nothing too crazy.
No.
Norris and Piastri up in P2 and P3, so that's really good start for McLaren to be able to challenge Verstappen with both their cars.
Yes.
And both Alpines did make it into Q3, showing that they are doing some good improvements on their car.
Definitely.
They have definitely gotten better from the start of the season. As we know, they were very terrible at the beginning of the season. So they did actually abort the start, which is something the FIA can do.
Yeah, because there were photographers behind the turn 1 barrier. So it posed a safety risk.
It's kind of silly because it's just like, isn't it your job to know where you're supposed to be? And then it just is annoying. You have to do an extra lap. They cut one lap off of the race then because, of course, the cars do use fuel during that formation lap.
Strategy.
That kind of messes it up for the teams. But they were able to just take one lap off. It's not a huge deal.
Yeah.
And then otherwise for the rest of the sprint, it wasn't too... nothing too crazy happened. The biggest thing that happened was the sort of fight between Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, and Max Verstappen.
Yes.
Now this was very exciting, and it really was a testament to how good the McLaren is now at this stage. Of course, it really started out with Lando and Max, but as Lando and Max started to fight, it kind of dragged Oscar in.
Yeah.
And it gave him a really good opportunity, and he was able to get past Norris and stay past Norris, mostly because I think Norris made a little bit of a silly mistake, which I feel like happens a lot with Norris.
It seems to as well, which brings me to this point where McLaren has the car, okay?
Yes.
But I don't think the drivers are 100% there to challenge Max Verstappen quite yet. I feel like there's still a disparity between driver skill and how they conduct themselves.
Yeah, I think that as of the Austrian Grand Prix, I think they are not totally at the point, I agree, where they can consistently challenge Max Verstappen and challenge him without running each other off the road.
Yes.
As we saw during the race.
Well, this also definitely proves also how good Max Verstappen is, and not just the car, which has been a debate over the past few years of whether it's just the car that's helping Verstappen get all these championships.
Yeah, I think this race and the sprint kind of show that it is more Max's skill.
Yes.
As Perez was a little bit further down the order.
P8.
Yeah, so P8 for him at the end of the sprint. It's really just not a great showing for Perez, but also it shows that it really is Max Verstappen and his skill and his ability to pilot this car well.
Yep.
That is really leading him to wins.
Yes, 100%.
Otherwise, the sprint was good. It was exciting to watch that fight, but otherwise, not too crazy.
Yeah.
I think we can move along into the race now.
All right.
So with qualifying there,
we see not really much of a difference, except we see George Russell in P3. But we also see the opposite of Verstappen, Norris 1-2. But we also see Piastri drop to P7.
Yeah, so not as good of a qualifying as the sprint qualifying for Piastri.
Yes.
But we also, I think what is interesting, is Hulkenberg up in P9.
Yes.
So Haas into Q3. That's really, really good for them. Magnussen's still P12, so not horrible. And I think this race, especially for Haas, was
a really good race. Yes.
Yeah, they really seem to have pace. Not, of course, like Red Bull pace and McLaren pace, but they seem to have pace.
Yes.
They finished the race 6th and 8th, so a very solid points haul for them from this race, and really not a bad qualifying. I think we're starting to see some improvement in Haas, and they're really starting to prove us wrong from what we thought they'd be at the
definitely. We thought they were going to be a bottom team just because after they got rid of Gunter Steiner, we thought the team would be downhill, but I think Haas is really going in the right direction now.
Yeah, definitely. This equaled their best finish in Austria, so really something they want to see and they want to continue with, of course.
Yes.
And bring home some solid points because I think their goal is probably going to be to. I think their biggest rival will be VCarb. If they can catch up to VCarb, that will be really crucial for them. At the moment, they are far behind.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably their goal is to catch up to
But I
VCarb.
feel like their racing is either equal or like arguably better than VCarb as of now.
So we're recording this a little later. We're after the Belgian Grand Prix at this point. But at this point, Haas is 27 points and VCarb's up at 34. So they're really not far off.
Nope.
And Alpine behind them only has 11. So I think their biggest rival here will be VCarb.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what Haas needs to do to prove that they can still be a competitive team. They need to challenge VCarb for points. Because, of course, in Formula 1, those points are money. They're where they finish in the constructors and the drivers is their money. So I think that'll be very important for them to get some more solid points finishes to challenge VCarb.
Another thing I would like to know is Aston Martin's struggle here.
Yes, definitely.
Down we see Fernando Alonso down at P15 and Lance Stroll at P17.
Yeah.
So not really great for Aston Martin right now.
Yeah.
They seem to be stalled out.
Yeah, I think Alonso especially seems to be frustrated.
Yeah.
You know, he's just re-signed with Aston Martin, and I definitely think this is not what he wanted to see.
Definitely not.
Last season for him was really, really great. He'll want to see more results like last season.
Yeah.
And I think he's just not seeing that at this point. And I mean, if it were me, I would be worried about that. I'm sure he's worried about that too.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it also doesn't help that you have Lance Stroll as your teammate as well. I
Yeah.
mean,
It kind of sucks because you can't, as a team now, I feel like Stroll has not really been doing what Aston Martin wants.
No.
Of course, he's doing what Lawrence Stroll wants, which at the end of the day is what Aston Martin wants. But for the good of the team, I think they would want a driver who can actually help them especially in the constructor standings, you know, to be able to challenge other teams. You know, I mean, at this point, Aston Martin is 5th place. They have a comfortable lead over VCarb, but still, I think they would always, of course, you'd like to extend that lead.
Yeah.
And will they catch up to Mercedes? Probably not, because Mercedes has 266 points compared to the measly, again, 73 points for Aston Martin. So that's a bit of a long shot for them, especially with the performance that we've seen from Mercedes recently.
Yes.
But I think that Aston really needs to get it together, get both their drivers to be able to work together and get some solid points for the team.
And as always, we see Williams and Stake continue their bottom of the grid. Just struggles.
Not great for them, especially for Stake. I mean, Williams at this point is
4 points.
Yeah, still not great as well. But Stake really is just not where they wanted to be.
Yeah.
You know, I think we were expecting something maybe bigger from them, from Sauber as they rebrand. But we really have not seen that. It's very unfortunate for them because they have two, I would say, at least alright drivers. You know, Zhou Guanyu, it's a little harder to say because we've really only seen him on Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
And Sauber. But
and of course, Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, of course, he's a very good, very established driver. And so it's tough, especially for Bottas, I think, because that car is just not good.
No.
And so that's something I think that Kick really needs to work out. Because without a solid car, of course, your drivers are never going to do well. You can have the best drivers in the world, and if your car is not good, nothing's going to happen.
I don't think they're really trying, though, only because that they're getting Audis replacing them in 2026. So
Yeah.
I don't think anything's really being done with them.
I think Sauber's probably at the point where they're sort of starting to run out of resources.
Yeah.
Which is likely why they sold the team to Audi. So I think it's harder for them to develop the car and get a better car.
Yeah.
Sort of like what we're seeing with Williams now, where they're sort of starting to run low on funding for their Formula 1 program, and I think that's really hindering them, both those teams, really. What we're seeing, I think it's really hindering them in their forward progress.
Yes.
But getting into the race, another note on Sauber. So Zhou Guanyu was the only one to start on a tire compound that was not the mediums. So he started on the hard tire, presumably to try and go long.
Yeah, because he did start in P20, so he's probably just trying to gain. When everyone else pits, he's trying to stay out longer on the track.
And to be fair, I mean, he did end up 17th, so I suppose it's better than last. But really, I don't think that strategy ended up doing them anything. We saw throughout the race that the hards were not a good tire.
Nope, not at all.
Many drivers were complaining about it. They were saying it's really not the good race tire. So clearly the medium was the tire to be on, and maybe like a longer stint on the mediums and try and do the shortest stint possible on those hards, and then get back on the mediums, because really those hards did not seem like a good tire.
No, not at all. All right, so we see the race start, and then we see Leclerc and Piastri contact in turn 1, which seemed to have Leclerc have wing damage after that.
I think this was the downfall for Leclerc.
Yeah.
He really got sandwiched between Perez on his right and Piastri on the left. They really squeezed him. It's hard, especially for Perez and Piastri, because you can't see. If you're 3 wide, it's really difficult to see the person all the way on the other side. So, Leclerc could see both of them probably fine, but Piastri, it's probably hard for him to see Perez, and same thing vice versa. And so that's really a challenging situation for all of them. But it was obviously, as we saw, worse. The worst for Leclerc. I mean, it ruined his race, and then after that, he never really managed to recover that much.
Yeah, because he did pit for that. So did Logan Sargent, I think. He pitted it
yeah,
also.
I don't really know why Logan pitted. It seemed kind of random.
It did. So I don't know exactly the reason why.
Yeah.
He might have been caught in something, but we don't know, and it wasn't really covered either. So
yeah, it was hard to say.
But yeah, basically Leclerc and Sargent were 19 and 20, and we saw Leclerc continue his struggles because it looked like he had floor damage too, which also led to the fact that Alex Albon passed him on lap 15.
Yeah, that was
in that Williams car.
That was a little sad.
Yeah, because Ferrari, no matter what happens, usually Ferrari is gonna have the better pace than in a Williams car.
I mean, you would hope so if you're driving the Ferrari. Yeah, I feel like there must have been something wrong, like you said, probably a floor damage issue, because there's no way that Albon I think is a good driver, but there's no way that Williams on raw pace should pass the Ferrari. They were both on hard tires, so there's a little bit of a tire advantage for Albon, but still either way.
But I think just the fact that he's a Ferrari should be enough.
Yeah, and so clearly there's had to be something else wrong with that car. He wasn't able to scrape together any points, and this was really, like with the last race, not the last race, but in Canada, this really was a race to forget for Charles.
Yes, definitely, 100%.
Moving a little further, we see Zhou Guanyu get hit by Fernando Alonso.
So this one didn't. Well, yeah. Fernando Alonso. It looked like he just ran into Joe in the corner.
Yeah, it was kind of uncharacteristic of Alonso, who is, of course, a 2-time world champion and a very good driver. Of course, we know.
Yeah, and he just blatantly ran into the side of Zhou Guanyu.
I mean, it looked like he locked his front right. So at that point, it's hard to turn in. But still, it seemed kind of like a sloppy move. He ended up getting a 10-second penalty for that. So it really it was not good for Alonso. It really shows that car. I mean, that one it's hard to say if it was on the car, if it was on him. There's a couple of things the drivers can do in the car to help to make it easier on them in terms of braking and not locking. But still, that's something that really is, I think, more of a driver error.
Yeah, I mean, it seems more of like a rookie mistake for as you say, 2-time champion as well.
Yeah, we've seen in the past. Alonso can get frustrated, especially during some of his times on McLaren. When the car was not performing well, it seems like he gets pretty easily frustrated with that.
Yeah.
And maybe that kind of frustration leaves you to just sort of drive in like a red mist, and you kind of make some silly mistakes.
Yeah.
So I think Alonso needs to maybe get in a different mindset of like, okay, the car's not where I want it to be, but let's just make the most of it. Let's make the best of it so we can make a better car next season.
Yeah.
So I think he needs to get maybe just a different mindset.
Definitely. So then on lap 23, we see Hamilton cross the white line in the pit entry, and I think that's just bad luck on his part. It
was a little bit his fault, probably a little not, because he really, he got a snap of oversteer.
Yeah.
So the back stepped out on him, and it slid over the white line on the pit entry. You're not allowed to cross that white line once you're committed to pitting. You can't cross out. It was unfortunate for him. He ended up with a 5-second penalty. So definitely not what he would have hoped for.
Yeah, definitely.
Just because it didn't hinder his race too much.
I'm saying the oversteer itself it didn't really hinder him at all, but it's just where it was.
Yeah. Still, like, the penalty, it didn't end up mattering at the end of the day. But still, it's never great when you get that penalty. So it's just kind of annoying if nothing else. It's in the back of your head then. But yeah, so kind of a sucky thing for him.
Yeah.
But nothing too bad for him.
So then we see Verstappen and Lando both pitting relatively at the same time. Well, Verstappen was first, and then Lando came in. So then when Verstappen was leaving, Lando was on his way, and it looked like an unsafe release by Verstappen.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very close. They didn't end up giving anybody a penalty.
No.
But it was super, super close because, I mean, Verstappen came out, and Lando was on the radio saying that, like, it hindered his ability to turn into the pit box, which is fair because, Max came out and he couldn't turn in when he wanted to. But at the end of the day, it really didn't matter that much. So I think that's probably what the stewards were looking at, and they really said, it's not worth a penalty.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a little bit annoying, I'm sure, for Lando, but it really didn't matter as much. And then we got a 5-second penalty for Perez for speeding in the pit lane. Again, another kind of a rookie mistake.
It's like unforced errors, I think. Just the pit lane ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little silly. That's kind of part of your job. I mean, to slow down enough, it's not. I feel like that can't be the hard part of doing the pit. So that's another one of those, like we said with Alonso, just another kind of rookie mistake, and like you said, an unforced error. That really should have been avoided for somebody who's been in the sport for as long as Perez. Yeah, that's not great. And then Charles pitted again. Leclerc, I don't know what Ferrari was doing at this point. They kind of just kept pitting Leclerc. He pit again on lap 35, so he had been mediums to start, then he went on to hards at his first pit stop on lap 1, and then back to mediums. I don't know, it's a little silly to me, and then I believe he pitted one more time before the end of the race.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be fair to Ferrari, he'd ended up 11th.
Yeah.
So he's not in the points, but he's not crazy far out of the points.
No.
But still, this strategy seemed a little strange to me. I would have thought you would go with another hard, but like we said, I mean, the hard was not a good tire, so maybe Ferrari figured we'll try 2 mediums. It might end up being faster than the hard.
And then on lap 37, we see another Ocon versus Gasly situation here, like we saw in Monaco.
Yeah, those two are old rivals from their karting days, and it really was not. It's not good for Alpine, so I think it's definitely good that they got rid of Ocon. Either way, they just need to get rid of one of the two. I don't think having them two on the same team is a good idea. I feel like having Ocon and anyone on the same team isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
It seems like every time Ocon and his teammate, I feel like Ocon and his teammate never get along. I mean,
never.
When he was teammates with Perez, they never liked each other. When he was teammates with Alonso, Alonso really doesn't like him. And when he's teammates with Pierre, of course, again, they had their history, but still, they really did not like each other. That was clearly evident in this fight.
Yeah.
It was a good fight to watch. It was very exciting.
Yeah.
However, it was silly from Alpine. They need to get those drivers to work together because they really need the points right now.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think, just kind of a weird little sidebar from those two.
Yeah, I mean they were both in the points at one point too, so it was.
I think Alpine just needs to get those two to get in check because it's sort of like it's silly. Like we saw in Monaco, when Ocon made kind of a silly move on Gasly, which ended up almost taking both of them out.
Yeah.
And so I think those two just need to figure it out and just work together for these last couple races
for the sake of the team.
Yeah, if nothing else, right? And then, but at this point, I mean, Ocon doesn't care, right? I mean, they said on the TV, it was kind of funny. It was like, well, what is Bruno Famin gonna do? Fire Ocon again? At this point, it's like, well, he can't. He doesn't care as much about the team. It's like it's like the opposite of Magnussen, where Magnussen, he's not worried about the team, or he does care about the team. He just wants the team to do well.
Yeah.
And he's not as worried about himself. It's kind of the opposite for Ocon. He's just worried about himself. Doesn't care about the team. So I think that's something, another mindset shift that needs to happen.
Yeah.
He just needs to get that through his head.
So we see also later in the race that Lando's rear tires are overheating.
Yeah, which I thought that was interesting. McLaren always has seemed to have very good tire management. So I know they did have some brake ducts that were being investigated that may or may not have been totally legal, but I believe they had those taped up. So that may have hindered them. We'll kind of see, but so interesting seeing that his tires were kind of overheating. Maybe something again, like we said with those brake ducts, maybe is affecting their tire life towards the end. But they still seem to have alright tire life, so I'm not sure how much it really impacted them.
Yeah. So and then we see another crossing line of pit entry penalty for Alex Albon, 5 seconds.
Yeah, the pit entry at Austria is really tricky because it's kind of on the racing line. So it's tricky to get in there, but really, I mean, they're professionals. They should be able to do this pretty easily. So kind of silly penalties for them again.
Then we see Max Verstappen complaining on the radio that he can't hold the McLaren behind for much longer and that he wants to pit for new tires.
I think it was interesting because this kind of shows that the pace of the McLaren is very good. Max clearly did not agree with this strategy that he was on.
Yeah.
He didn't seem to like it, and he really, he says he is having trouble holding behind the traffic behind him and keeping that McLaren back and keeping the distance. So that's interesting to see, that the McLaren really is catching up in terms of performance, and I think at this point may have passed the Red Bull in terms of performance.
No, I think they definitely have passed the Red Bull in terms of performance. I think right now Verstappen's leaning on his championship pedigree, and that is really just helping him right now.
Yeah.
But McLaren definitely has, I think, surpassed him because we see, struggles of Sergio Perez as well, but still, they're still ahead of him.
Yeah.
Considerably.
And then when Max finally does pit, he loses a lot of time on his pit stop.
Yeah, I think
his
it was
back left.
It was back left, yeah.
Was very slow to come on, which really, I think he gave him about a 6-second pit stop.
It was, I confirm, it was 8-second pit stop.
8-second pit stop. But still, that slow pit stop really allowed Norris to catch up. And then it started this big fight that it was kind of silly at most points, I think. Really, both drivers were being a little careless. Yes. I think especially Norris. But Max was moving under braking. Lando kept going on the radio saying that he was moving under braking, which you're not allowed to do. And so it seemed like, it was inevitable that the two would crash. They did end up crashing. When you watch it the first time, it seems very dramatic. When you go back and watch it a couple times, it really doesn't seem very crazy.
But it was both of their faults.
Yes.
But the penalty was given to Verstappen.
Yes. But, of course, if you gave the penalty to Lando, it wouldn't matter because he had retired.
Yeah, but not just that. Verstappen didn't give him any space either on that.
Yeah, he did kind of turn into... He moved over a little bit.
Norris.
I wouldn't say he fully turned into him, but he moved over a little bit right at the beginning of the corner. And then after they came out and they both hit each other, Max did kind of run him off the road a little bit.
Well, they seemed both to have tire punctures, and the McLaren did seem to have a little bit more damage.
The McLaren was definitely worse. I think it's mostly because that tire got shredded.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of whipping the side of the side pod. And that of course takes a lot of body work, and that's not good for them.
No.
So I think for both of them it was kind of silly, a little bit of a silly fight. They really did not want to give each other any kind of space. I think Lando needs to realize that that's what it's like to fight Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
That he's not going to give you any space for the future, because otherwise this will just keep happening.
Definitely. And then we do see, we confirm that Norris does... Okay, so there was a virtual safety car after that.
But before the virtual safety car, though, Piastri was able to pass Carlos Sainz for second place.
Yes.
So that was interesting, too, again, seeing the pace of the McLaren compared to another car, the Ferrari, who was actually doing well in this race, and it's not Charles Leclerc. And they were very quick. Piastri was able to catch up quickly and pass the Ferrari, it seemed like pretty easily. So definitely another comparison for that pace of the McLaren.
Yes.
So Norris retires, and there's a virtual safety car that comes out for not very long, but most likely there was some debris on the track they had to clear up. They really didn't do anything because, again, it was out for a very, very short time, and there was 5 or 6 laps left. It was close to the end. Verstappen pitted though after the incident.
He went onto soft tires and managed to secure that fastest lap point.
Yeah, so good for them. Of course, at that point, with 5 or 6 laps left to go, you don't care about tire management.
Nope.
So you can just go as fast as possible. He came back out in 5th, and he got a 10-second penalty for that incident.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter because the car behind him is Hulkenberg, and he was He was like 20 seconds behind.
Something like that.
So not a big deal for Verstappen. And then Piastri was quick. It looked like maybe he could have gotten caught up to Russell if he had more time.
Yeah, he was, I think, 2.5 seconds behind him.
Yeah,
still,
so maybe if he had more time, a couple more laps, he would have been able to do it. But I think, Russell had a good race. He was, he was ready to grab that win.
He did.
He
came out of the shadows. He was like in P3 the entire time, the entire race. P3. And then that incident happened, and he just waltzed right through into that win.
But a good race for him. His first win since Sao Paulo, the Brazilian Grand Prix.
2022.
Yeah, 2022. Of course, that was a 1-2 for Mercedes. We haven't seen that in a little bit, but so it was a good race for Russell.
Yes.
Overall, it was very exciting. Those last 20 laps were very, very exciting to watch for us. And then just looking down the rest of the order, points for Alpine once again with Pierre Gasly, as well as Daniel Ricciardo picking up 2 points.
And then as we mentioned before, the Haas, Nico Hulkenberg in 6th place and Kevin Magnussen in 8th.
And we see the Ferrari does still seem to have some pace, so it's not entirely gone as Sainz was P3, but still the Ferrari doesn't look great. It doesn't look the best. It's definitely worse than the McLaren, and they're pretty close with Mercedes. I think Mercedes is starting to edge out the Ferrari.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ferrari hasn't really done anything to combat McLaren and Mercedes at this rate too. So it's only a matter of time before Mercedes also catches up as well. But we also see Sergio Perez, not a bad race this time around.
Yeah, not terrible. He's had worse races for sure.
Yeah.
P7 for him is all right, I guess.
Yeah.
And then also the Lance Stroll did finish higher than his teammate Alonso.
Yeah.
Stroll in 13th and Alonso in 18th, so not a good race for either of them. But Stroll did technically finish higher, so I suppose that's something for him.
Yeah.
And then Norris, of course, with that DNF. So not the race Norris would have wanted. He thought he was going to do well. It did not go, of course, how he would have wanted.
Yeah.
But overall, not the worst race.
Not.
For Ferrari even especially. Especially I think that's the big one that it really seemed bad, but looking back on it, it wasn't too bad.
I mean, Leclerc managed to almost get points, so I mean, it wasn't totally off.
Now we do want to switch gears a little bit. So we found a head-to-head for the qualifying results, and this is after the first 12 races.
Yes.
So every time Max Verstappen has out-qualified Sergio Perez, 12-0. So for the first 12 races, Max has out-qualified Checo. Again, as we've said, that is not a good look for Checo.
Nope.
However, as of now, it is supposedly confirmed that Perez will be staying with the team.
After the summer break, yes.
Yeah, so we'll see how true that ends up being, as Red Bull said that Pierre Gasly would be safe with the team and then cut him about 2 days later. So we'll see how true that ends up being.
Yeah.
But for Perez's sake, hopefully it is. He seems to be very against these rumors, and so we'll see.
We also see Alex Albon also out-qualifying Logan Sargent every single time.
Yes. Except he only has out-qualified him 11 times, as Logan did not race one race because he stole his car.
Yeah.
So, again, that's kind of a weird thing, I feel like, for Williams. But still, Albon and Sargent is really a very strange matchup still. I feel bad for Logan that he really doesn't seem to have any confidence. And I think it is a good idea for him to move to something like IndyCar.
Yeah.
Because that really, I think, is where I think he would do better there.
And at the point of recording this, he does not have a seat at Williams. That seat has been filled, but we will talk about that at a later time.
Yes. And then looking at Sauber, similar situation. But Zhou Guanyu has only out-qualified his teammate Valtteri Bottas one time. So that's kind of, I think, what you expect with Valtteri Bottas. I mean, we know he's a good driver. He's a several race winner with Mercedes. So that's not really too surprising. What is surprising, though, is Mercedes, I think. George Russell has outqualified Lewis Hamilton 10 times out of the 12 races.
Yes.
That's very interesting because, I mean, of course, we know Lewis Hamilton is a 7-time world champion, and George Russell is has won, I don't know, a couple races now. Like, it's kind of interesting to see. I mean, Russell really does seem to be, like, the number one guy for Mercedes.
I think he has developed really well into where he can inherit that position as the first driver, like, very well.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
it's really nice to see that Mercedes is in good hands with George Russell.
Yeah, for sure. Another matchup that's about the same is McLaren. So Lando has outqualified Piastri 10 times in the same way as Mercedes.
Yes.
I think that's kind of what we expect. Of course, Lando's been here for much longer. I mean, well, not much longer, I suppose, but a decently longer than Piastri.
As of late, though, Piastri has seemed to be doing a little better than Lando.
Yeah, I mean, Piastri he's been, I think this season he's really showing what he can do, and he's been picking up some really solid results.
It's really hard to like picture that he's only a season and a half into his career.
Yeah,
I mean, that's insane for him.
And then Haas is, again, not too surprising from what we know. Hülkenberg has outqualified Kevin Magnussen 9 times.
Yeah.
Another one that's I don't think is too surprising, but something to continue to watch. I think, like we said, Magnussen's mostly going for the good of the team.
Yeah, he's like taking a back seat so he could support Hülkenberg.
Yeah. And then RB, another interesting one because I think there's a lot of rumors of we are seeing Daniel Ricciardo to Red Bull, but Yuki Tsunoda has outqualified Ricciardo 9 times. I think this is why it's interesting to me that there's talks of Ricciardo to Red Bull because it doesn't make sense to me. I know a lot of people are like, you're either pro Yuki or pro Daniel, and you're like super anti the other person. I don't think I'm that way. I just don't think that Ricciardo seems to be performing as like a Red Bull driver should.
Yeah.
I think Yuki seems to be able to do that better.
I guess, but then again, we've brought this point up many times. Who's going to be the best person to let Max Verstappen shine?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like Yuki, his driving style, he wants to win. He definitely wants to win. He's driving to win. So I don't think he would be a support driver to Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
I think he's too, I don't know how to put this into words.
He's a little too aggressive, I think.
Too aggressive, yeah. I think so.
That he would challenge Max Verstappen.
Yeah, definitely.
And then Alpine, it is 8-4 for Ocon. So Ocon has qualified Pierre Gasly 8 times. We've seen, especially towards the beginning of the season, I feel like now Gasly is starting to come into understanding this car. But especially at the beginning of the season, I feel like he really seemed to struggle. So I think that's where we're seeing a lot of that. From Ferrari, Leclerc has outqualified Carlos Sainz 7 times. Another one that's like a little tricky because I think they're both good drivers, and in the race they're more equal. I mean, in terms of race result, they're 5-5. But otherwise, I think that Leclerc seems to always do well in qualifying, whereas Sainz seems to be more consistent during the race.
Yeah, which. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then Aston, we see 7. Alonso's outqualified Stroll 7 times. I would have thought it would be a little more, but not crazy surprising.
Well, we also
he's
said
winning.
That Alonso's like frustrated right now too, as well.
Yeah.
Like as you said, with the car probably.
Yeah.
So I think that Stroll being close to him is not really that far off.
Yeah. And I think that about wraps it up for us today. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we will see you for the next one.
Goodbye.